So this is for assignment 2 and talking mainly about learning theories, but also building in a couple other components just in part to capitalize on the opportunity here for the additive process of design and then instructional design as I'm sort of seeing it as we move through the content here. So let's talk about learning theories. There's a lot of learning theories. We certainly see a mix of learning theories, I believe, as we watch processes unfold in instructional design. But if we look at the top three in behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism, they're hard to say. Sometimes as much as hard to differentiate sometimes. But what I like about them is to think about the buzzword in all of them. So for behaviorism, it's the behavior, it's the act. For cognitivism, it's the thinking. And for constructivism, it's the experience. So at its core, behaviorism really is about repeating until it's automatic. It's this focus on not just repetition to get competency, but hopefully eventually mastery. Whereas with cognitivism, it's really the mind registering information as either short-term or long-term, and it's a focus on the processing of the information. So it isn't just the act of repetition, it's how it's processed and retained. And then with constructivism, it's really a focus and at its core that knowledge is constructed versus absorbed, meaning instead of someone giving me information and I absorb it, I'm experiencing it and the knowledge is being constructed by me. So a similarity and a difference to the others, if you think about behaviorism, is really it doesn't have to just be repeated only through absorption. It could involve constructing. It could involve the constant repeat of constructing, like let's say in the matter of hammering a nail and over and over and over again until you get the repetition down. It sounds simple, but right, it's part of that is constructing your knowledge through repetition, through repeating the same things over and over. And I think that is sort of joined at the hip. But then the difference is it's really focused on the acts. It's the actual act, the physical act. Whereas with cognitivism, primary pieces of this is really that primary learning becomes a key. And that's good because then we think about behaviorism, we think about constructivism. There's a lot of prior learning that goes on in all three, right? But the difference is it's really, I think, a lot of times focused on capability, the capability of the individual with their thinking. So that is a difference, and it's something to think about as you would put together and design instruction. For constructivism, the experiences can be repeated. That's a similarity. Now think of that. For behaviorism, thinking, it can be a repetitive process, I think, in many of them. But a difference with constructivism is the focus is on the individual. So if the individual is the one having to have the experiences, then the richness of that experience is what's going to drive a lot of their constructing of the knowledge versus an absorption where it's coming from someone else to you. So there's a lot of similarities and differences, but I find a lot of these three not just similar, but bundled together. And what I mean by that is this. If you're designing instruction and you're using these as just single strands, you're doing it as repeating. You're doing it as having the student thinking. You're doing it as having the student experiencing. So if we use those three, what about all three of them? Now, an argument might be that some of it is baked into whether it's training. I put vocational there, because a lot of training is vocational in nature, automotive technology, construction, etc. Versus education, which could be more academic. Things like critical thinking or someone who's trying to learn more deep learning within the Englishes or the and maths types, the arts, etc. So could we say, though, that everything is truly vocational? And I would argue, and I have argued this many times, I think it is. I think whether it's nursing or it's engineering or it's learning to be an accountant, on back to the construction and the automotive, right? I think it's all vocationalism. However, you have to build into many of these roles that people have the ability to do thinking, the critical thinking that comes in to be able to do a job that goes beyond just repeating an act. So in many ways, aren't these theories all used? And I think the answer is yes. So when we put together a job aid with Addie, although this wasn't part of the requirement for the assignment in the PowerPoint, I wanted to include it here because it's interesting in how Addie modeling, if we think of the steps, really lead to something. So in step 1, analysis, it leads to outcomes. Step 2, design, it leads to a blueprint. Step 3, develop, it leads to production. Step 4, implement, it leads to installation. And step 5, evaluate, leads to confidence. Okay, so we've got these steps, but going back to the previous slide, and we're asking ourselves, are we able to bundle the 3 in order to bring that out? I think the answer is yes, because as we would design and we would think about how we're going to get to the end where we're evaluating and getting confidence in what we delivered, shouldn't repeating and having the student think and having the student experience all be in one? And could you build instruction that way, where there is repetition and the cognitive piece with thinking, and then having an experiential piece built in? What if every single thing you built had to have some kind of an experience where you worked with someone else? Now we're talking apprenticeship. So when we think instructional design, from a collage standpoint, I had done a collage earlier to the right here that's the puzzle piece there, if you will, that has the Addie process of analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate. So you see it with the pieces. And really my question is, how do you keep it fresh, right, when you go through that? So part of this collage is my 3 to the left there, which is we're really asking a lot of questions, right? We're trying to get to the crux of what the problem is. So it's a lot of questioning. Then a lot of it is really the build, the design, the develop, the implement. It's really the build part. Remember the Legos where we build things and we try to figure out what we want to build. And the next thing you know, we decide to build something different, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a formative process. And then the last piece is the evaluate. So you see the white glove piece there. So when we evaluate it, do we like what we see? Do we think the outcomes were actually what we accomplished? And did we answer those questions? And then that's really the summative piece, right? So thank you for listening.